Breaking news! The author of Let the Great World Spin, Colin McCann, makes fiction worthwhile to read. He writes about each character's perspective on life, leaving the reader no choice but to step into the character's shoes. Each character is clearly flawed. Their flaws seem understandable because of the situations that the characters are faced with. For example, one of the characters, her name is Laura. She was faced with a split-second decision that will haunt her for the rest of her life. Our sources say that she was quoted, quote, "Behind us we could hear the sirens, already on their way. And he let out a groan of despair, and I knew it was for the car and our own unsold canvases, and what would happen to us shortly. I said to him, 'Come on, let's go. Quick, get in. Blaine, quick, get a move on.'" End quote. This decision to leave was just after the two had clipped a van and sent it in a spiral, instantly killing a woman. Along with the young girl who was killed, they also left the man in critical condition. He later died at the hospital. Unfortunately for Laura, in the moment of fear, we do not always think rationally. Colin McCann forces the reader to be empathetic towards Laura because she wasn't the one driving, and she was afraid of the situation. And in the end, she made a poor decision. The question then becomes, what would you do in this situation? How would you react if you accidentally hit a car, sent it spiraling, and watched a woman die? Would you drive away from the scene?
So, Miss Natalie, if you were to cause an accident which ended up killing 2 innocent people, would you stop?
You're so silly. Of course I would, mister. Does this mean I'm going to be on TV?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, goody!
Anyway, what if you went to prison for the rest of your life?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So you wouldn't stop?
I guess not, sir. I'd be too scared.
That's all I needed. Thanks, Miss Natalie.
Oh, you're welcome. And now we're back. We have a new lead in the story. It seems that Laura has become a victim of Blaine's reckless driving, along with Jaslyn and Corrigan. Laura takes these deaths very seriously and tries to do her best to help the families. When Laura visits the hospital to see if Corrigan is still alive, Laura finds that he is dead, and she ends up with the box of Corrigan's possessions. She knows returning the box is the right thing to do, but is conflicted about doing so. Anyone facing the family of the person they killed would be a nervous wreck. McCann quotes Laura on this situation. Quote, "What I was doing was unpardonable, and I knew it. I could feel my chest thumping in my blouse, but the woman parted from me, and I went through the curtain of grief." McCann allows the reader to step into Laura's life for that moment, and forces the reader to ask himself, what would I do?
So, Josephine, what would you do if you had the man's possessions that you killed?
Yo, I wouldn't want to touch that. I mean, it's got germs and death on it. It could even be haunted.
So you wouldn't want to return it to the family?
I mean, for real though, that'd be my best option if I wanted to stay out of the system. But in all seriousness, I would be afraid to face the family.
Oh, I see. Thank you for your time.
In other news, Atticus Finch makes fiction worth reading in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. The lessons he teaches, Scout and Jem, are valuable lessons that everyone can learn from. Harper Lee uses her characters' relationships, especially Scout and her father's, to teach important life lessons. For example, Lee uses Atticus as the wise father figure. Quote, "First of all," he said, "if you can learn a simple trick, Scout, you'll get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. End quote. Lee takes advantage of the situation she puts Scout in to emphasize empathy. She blatantly states the value of it. At the end of the novel, empathy comes up again as a major theme. As Scout matures, she realizes, quote, Atticus was right. One time he said, you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. Just standing on Radley's porch was enough. End quote. Scout is finally able to see the world through the eyes of Boo Radley. She understands Boo's point of view. Harper Lee incorporates empathy within the lives of her characters. Our next segment is called Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? Joyce Carol Oates created a short story that invokes empathy for a young girl named Connie, who has been second all her life. She finally gets a chance to be first, however, it becomes a bad situation very quickly. A young man comes to her home while she is alone and tries to persuade her to go for a ride in his car. Oates must have realized that this situation does happen, and most women would not know how to deal with it. Fiction is valuable because it makes the reader reassess what they would have done in that situation. Anyone would tell her not to go with him, no questions asked. But as soon as the stranger brings her family into it, circumstances change. Quote, You don't want them to get hurt, Arnold's friend went on. Now get up, honey. Get up all by yourself. She put her hand out against the screen. She watched herself push the door slowly open, as if she were back safe somewhere in another doorway. Watching this body, this head of long hair, moving out in the sunlight where Arnold's friend waited. End quote. The reader feels the need to feel bad for Connie because the reader would have had a hard time deciding what to do in that moment, just as Connie did. As human beings, we do not know what we would do when faced with the dire circumstances unless we experience it ourselves. And that is what empathy is for. And that is the value of reading fiction.
What would you do if a strange man came to your house and asked you to come with him?
I would definitely not go with him.
What if he threatened to kill your whole family?
Personally, I'd resist, but then I'd still go with him because I'd like to save my whole family. To wrap up this broadcast, we're going to talk about poetry on a lighter note. The poem Bittersweet by Alan Harris helps emphasize empathy. He writes about the understanding of the human experience. Even though certain things might not happen to you personally, you still are able to understand it, and that's what empathy is. It's the emotion and feeling that connects human beings to each other. Harris understands empathy. Quote, Cry your tears into this saucer, as I cry mine there too. Let us mix them together and drink a quaint communion. End quote. Harris states that in the stanza that when you cry, he will feel the pain as well, describing the emotions of healthy human beings. Empathy will make the world go round. Though some of you rebellious teenagers out there might not realize it, fiction helps us make human connections. It allows us to understand our peers better. Fiction allows us to learn coping mechanisms, lessons. It provides life lessons through the lives of the characters.